Welcome back, everyone. In this lecture, we're going to be discussing functions, and functions are going to be a huge leap forward in your capabilities as a programmer. Now, creating clean, repeatable code is a key part of becoming an effective programmer. And right now, if we wanted to have code repeat itself, basically we just have to copy and paste that code. Luckily, functions allow us to create blocks of code that can be easily executed many times without needing to constantly rewrite or copy and paste that entire block of code. Instead, we can just make a simple function call. Let's explore the syntax of actually creating our own functions. It starts off with the def keyword, basically defining the function. Then we have the name of the function, and the name of the function should be all lowercase and then use snake casing, so those underscores to separate words. Then we have parentheses, a colon, and then we have a docstring explaining the function. You saw in the previous lecture how we had docstrings explaining methods, so there's a similar docstring explaining the function. And then we have whatever code we want to execute when we call that function. So right now, all this function does is it prints out the word hello. So here we see at the bottom in purple what it would actually look like. We would call the function, and in this case, it would print out back hello. Now, it should also be noted that functions can actually take in parameters. So here now we're passing the name parameter that the user will provide when they call the function. And then we print out hello concatenated with name, so hello plus name. So in that case, you'd call the function as shown in the bottom here. Name a function, and you would pass in some string, and then it would say, hello, Jose. Now typically, instead of printing things out, we're actually going to be using the return keyword to send back the result of the function instead of just printing it out. So a really common question for beginners is what's the difference between printing stuff out and returning stuff in the function? Well, return allows us to assign the output of the function to a new variable. So it would look something like this. Here's a simple function, def, and it's called add function, and it takes in two parameters or two arguments, num1 and num2. And then what it does, it's going to return num1 plus num2 instead of printing them out. And the way you would use this in your code is when you call the function, you would set the result equal to some variable name. So here I'm saying result is equal to add function 1, 2, meaning when I actually print out the result, I get to see 3. So now that we've gone over the syntax, let's jump to a Jupyter Notebook to really explore this further. All right, let's start by defining a very simple function. We use the keyword def. Notice that it has syntax highlighting there. And then you can call the function whatever you want. So we can say something like name function, open and close parentheses. And right now we won't have this function take in any parameters. And then we have a colon. And as we know, colons indicate that there's going to be an indented block of code. So we hit enter here, and now we see this indentation so that this block of code will execute whenever we call this name function. So all this function is going to do is just print hello. And then once it's defined, what we can do is call the function. So if I just say name function like this, what's going to happen is Python will report back, hey, you have this function called name function, and there it is. To actually have it execute, what I need to do is have open and close parentheses. So then when I run it, I actually get back hello. So this is probably one of the most basic functions you can have. def, the name of the function, open close parentheses, meaning it takes no arguments, and then we just have something to be printed out. Now you'll notice right now, if I do shift tab, I get a signature, and then it says no docstring here. And if I call help on this function, so if I call help right here, and I run this, it'll just say, hey, this is the name function with no further information. Now that's not really useful for someone else in the future who's going to be using our code and our functions. So to help with this, we end up adding a docstring. And the way we do this is we have a pair of 3 sets of either single quotes or double quotes. You can see here that Jupyter and most IDEs will auto-complete this. So we have 3 single quotes here and 3 single quotes here, and then we have our docstring. So here is just information about the function. And good things to put in here are expected inputs. So something like input is name, and then something like output could be hello. And right now we actually don't have any input, so we could say no input. But you get the idea. What I'm going to do now is run this again. So notice I'm running the cell again to redefine this function. And now when I call help and I rerun this, now I see the actual docstring. Docstring, information about the function, input, output. So when you were doing shift plus tab on built-in functions, what you were getting back is this docstring that's in the function. Okay, so A lot of the functions we do in this course, we won't bother putting doc strings in them because you're going to see how I'm constructing them. But when you're going to be creating code, not just for yourself, but for other people, it's definitely a good idea to put in documentation strings. That way, in the future, people will understand what the purpose of the function is. So let's move on. Let's go back to this function that simply says hello. We're going to say hello, colon, and then print out hello. So when I actually call this, again, open close parentheses, I get back hello. So this is a simple print hello function. And now let's add a parameter or an argument to this function. So we're going to have it take in this parameter called name. And then we'll have it say hello concatenated with name. And then when I run this, whoops, now you'll notice that I get an error. It says say hello is missing one required positional argument. So it actually now requires name. So let's give it a name. We'll say Jose. And then we run this back, I get back hello Jose. Now, as you noted, I got an error when I didn't pass in a parameter. It said, hey, I'm expecting some sort of required positional argument. So what we can do is have a default argument or a default parameter here. So if I don't pass in name, right now I get an error. But to avoid that, what I could do is give a default name. So the default name I could give is something like name. So just all caps name. And I assign a default with this equal sign. So then when I run this and I say hello again without providing anything, it says hello name. So this default is going to basically leave something there just in case you don't provide one. And there's many functions in Python that have defaults for a lot of parameters. But now if I actually provide a name, maybe I say Sally, it'll report back hello Sally. So the default only occurs when you don't actually provide anything into this function. So it says hello name, but then when I actually provide something, David, we can see now, hello David. Okay, so those are the basics of functions that just print stuff out. But typically what we're going to do is want to get the actual results back to save to a variable. And let me show you what I mean by that. If I say result is equal to say hello David, and I run this, it still prints out hello David. And let me show you that clearly by putting in another name. We'll put in Zach, and it says hello Zach. But let's check out our result. Well, I actually don't get anything for our result. In fact, if we check the type of our result, it happens to be none type. And because this function is just printing something out, it's not actually returning anything to assign to a variable. For that, we need to use the return keyword. So I'm going to get rid of this print and put in a return keyword here. And let's delete these cells real quick so we can get clean result. And I'm going to rerun this cell to redefine that function now that it has return. And then I can finally say result, say hello, and we'll put in Jose here. And now when I check out result, it's the actual string hello concatenated with Jose. So let's see another example of this. We're going to say def. We're going to create a function called add. And then we say n1, n2, or whatever variables you want. And then I'm going to return n1 plus n2. And then I can say result is equal to add 20, 30, and then my result is 50. So that's the ability to use the return keyword in order to return back the operations that the function is doing, and the final result, you can save it to a different variable. And this is typically what you're going to be using with functions. It's not too common that you're using functions to just print stuff out, only because we're trying to show you the basic syntax of the function where we're printing stuff out. Typically, when you're using functions, you're often going to be using the return keyword because you want to save the results as some sort of variable name in order to use it later on in your code. So now I can use result in another cell or further along in my script. All right, so we actually know all the syntax we need to know in order to create our own functions. And functions are really going to allow you to solve problems. And I want to show you that by writing a couple of example problems here and then using a function in order to solve them. So functions really allow you to take in parameters, do some sort of logical operations with them, and then return back a solution. So let me show you what I mean by that. Let's imagine we have a problem statement that says, find out if the word dog is in a string. So we have this problem. We need to find out if the word dog is in a string. Well, in order to do this with a function, we can do the following. We'll say dog check, and it takes in some string, which we'll label s. And you can call this variable whatever you want. So you can call it my string, or s, or the dog string, anything like that. So I'll call it my string. And then what we need to do here is check if the word dog is in the string. So what we could do is the following. We'll say if dog in my string return true, else return false. So this is typically what a beginner would think as a pretty good solution, but let's see what happens if we actually run this code. We'll say dog check, and we'll do the following. We'll say my dog ran away. So when I run this, it says true. Hey, my dog, we have dog in there. So let's do another test. Let's say my cat ran away and see what happens. And now it says false. However, what if we write this? Dog ran away. Well, now when I run this, it gets back false. And the reason for that is because it's only searching for dog in the lowercase. So what I could do is add a little more logic here. I could say in my string dot lower return true, else return false. So I rerun this cell to update my function, and then when I run this, now it says true, because now the logic says if dog in my string dot lowercase. So it's going to lowercase all these letters before doing the dog check inside of that string. And we can actually improve this function further. In fact, I would say that the way the function is written right now is basically one of the key indicators that whoever wrote this is still a beginner in Python. And the reason is this. Dog in my string dot lower itself is a Boolean. And I want to show you what I mean by that. I'm going to copy this. So we'll say dog in dog ran away. So when I run this, this statement, this in statement by itself, is already returning a Boolean true or false, meaning I actually don't even need this if statement, because this right here is already going to be true or false. So this is why I say this is a typical example of showing off that someone's still a beginner in Python, because they kind of forgot the fact that this is already a Boolean. So all I actually need to do is say return dog in my string lower. And then I can delete these if else statements, because this by itself is already the Boolean true or false. So now when I run this, I see that it returns back the same results. And this is where you can tell someone's a little more experienced in Python, because they're able to do this cleanly in one line by realizing this by itself is already a Boolean. Okay, so that's an example of a problem we just solved using functions. All right, so the next actual task we're going to be able to solve with a function is Pig Latin. And in case you're not familiar with Pig Latin, here's the rules. It's basically a way to transform a normal word into a secret code word. And if the word starts with a vowel, what we end up doing is add the term AY to the end. If the word does not start with a vowel, then we grab that first letter and then we stick it to the end and then we say add AY there. So here we have an example of a word that doesn't start with a vowel, the actual word, and then we take W because it's not a vowel, stick it to the end, and then add AY. So now we have Ordway. Apple does start with a vowel, so then we just add AY. We don't actually move the first letter, so we have Apple A. Okay, let's check this out. Let's see if we can make our Pig Latin translator. So we have DEF, Pig Latin, and we'll take in some variable, so we'll call this variable word, colon, and now it's time to actually start the logic of this Pig Latin translator. So the first thing we should do is probably grab the first letter because we're going to need to check to see if it's a vowel. So we'll do the following. We'll say first letter is equal to word at index 0. And we won't assume any weird edge cases like the person passes in a single letter as a string. We'll just assume they're passing in normal words. And we'll say first letter is equal to index 0 of that word. So then let's check if the first letter is a vowel. And here it's good to comment your code. So we'll say check if vowel. So we'll say first letter, and let's actually make this an if statement. If the first letter is in the string A-E-I-O-U, colon, then we have a vowel here. So if this first letter is actually in this string of vowels, so notice this is kind of the same check we did up here with dog in my string.lower. Instead now we're checking, hey, is this first letter in this string meaning is it in the string of vowels? What we're going to do is actually construct the word. So we'll say pig word is equal to, so if it's first a vowel, all we end up doing is we grab the normal word and then add AY to the end of it. Else, then we know there's no actual vowel there. So then what we have to do is the following. We'll say that the pig word is equal to word from index 1 all the way to the end, plus the first letter, plus AY. And then at the end of all this, outside, lined up with this if-else, we're going to return the pig word. All right, so we have our code here. Let's check out and see if it works. We'll say pig Latin, and then let's pass in a normal word. Let's go ahead and pass in word, see if that works. And then we get back Ordway. Perfect. Let's see if we pass in a word that starts with a vowel, such as apple, and we get back Apple-a. And this is how you can solve basic problems with functions. And this right now is going to be your main building block when working with Python. So functions are really going to improve your capabilities. And we can see here already the types of problems that we can easily solve now that we have the power of functions in front of us. Okay, so that's it for this lesson in functions. And you can check out the notebook for some more complex examples, such as checking if a number is prime. And we actually in the notebook show you 2 different methods of working with that. But for right now, all we need to know about functions is that we have the def keyword, you have the name of the function itself, whatever parameter or argument you want to pass, then you have whatever logic of code indented in the function. So notice we have a colon here, and then finally you return whatever result you want to return. That's the basics of functions, and we're going to get a lot more practice with them in just a little bit. We'll see you at the next lecture.